You're tuned in to the MtG Cable cast, where they cover Magic, the Gathering Finance. All right? You don't know about it? You're tuned in right now and get ready to learn some shit. Buckle your seatbelts and light a blunt and get ready for the MtG Cable cast. Starring Reptar and Thursty, them onion head motherfuckers.
Alrighty, guys, welcome to the newest episode of the Cabal Cast. And this week, we're kind of doing a throwback topic. This week was Star City Games Baltimore, and my lovely co-host was there. So with it being kind of an interesting time in Magic organized play, as well as just for Star City in general, because their tour has really branched out. We're basically just going to do an episode about what Star City events are like now, because they are drastically different than they were at this point last year. So with that, let's get it taken away.
Right. So we got to Baltimore for the Legacy 1K on Friday, which was one of the first events. And it was in the bottom of the convention center in Baltimore Harbor. It was the convention center that they used for Otakon. So this place is huge. And we were in a very specific room that was basically more than enough for this event. It was a large rectangular room. When you walked in, you were greeted by the Coalesce Apparel and Design booth. Across from them was the Learn to Play Flesh and Blood booth, which was not set up on Friday, but all the scaffolding and the skinning was up. So you knew what was going to be there for Saturday and Sunday. After that, the room was basically split into quarters. So if you think about it, as you walk into the top right-hand corner of the room, that's where all the vendors were, including Star City. Below that was the play area for all the games. And the interesting part about this area was that the overwhelming majority of the space was in what most people considered the main body of the convention area, but for the last 40 feet, the ceiling dropped, and those last couple tables were not quite a free play area, I don't think, but there were events held there for true side events throughout the weekend. Then the bottom left-hand corner of the room was the command zone, and that was kind of walled off with their own little bit of piping and drapery. Outside of that, between the bottom left-hand corner of the room and the top left-hand corner of the room was the backpack streaming area where Corey Baumeister was set up, and somebody was set up for the swoop event that happened on Friday. The last little bit of the top left-hand area that's left were the tables where people could basically eat lunch or hang out while they were watching the backpack stream, the main stage, and then the couple of food elements that existed. There were 2 free-floating stands, I think a Papa John's, Nathan's Hot Dogs, and then something embedded in the convention center. Bathrooms were when you walked in on the left, on the far side, and there was a set of bathrooms outside. Friday, the entire convention center was open, so you were free to kind of walk through from the hotels in the area, use the bathrooms, etc. But Saturday and Sunday, the convention center was closed, and we kept getting bounced by security to go through the main doors out to the street. Not a problem. It just meant that you were walking outside to go to and from your hotel. There were no additional bathrooms for you to use in the convention center unless you could wiggle your way by security. And it wasn't an annoyance by any means, but it was something that happened in the room. And I'll bring up real quick before we continue on some of the photos that I took of the space. So this first photo is basically sitting or standing between the vendors and the main play area. And what you see on the right-hand side of the screen, the middle row of tables in this room is where the Legacy 1K happened, the Modern 10K, and the Legacy 5K. This was Magic. On the left, this is where the kind of supplemental events happen. So this is the Star Wars, the Swusoft, the One Piece, the Lorcana. And then we can see straight down where the Magic section is, and you can see where the ceiling dips in the background. And then further off to the right, you can see in the distance the drapery that made up the command zone and a little bit of the drapery for the feature match area. I basically just stood in the same spot as best I could, centralized to the Magic play area, spun in a circle, and took some photos. And the overall experience on Friday was pretty interesting compared to the other days, but we'll kind of capture that as we go.
Sure. So first question I have, and this is one that I think used to be the question at events, was one, how many vendors were there? Who were they? And how was vendor share?
Got it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 vendors, including Star City. We had, and this is from the moment you walked in the room to the end of the vendor run, Strike Zone, Card Monster, Tales of Adventure, Dice City, Galactus, a vendor called God's Arena. They are from Canada. 95 MTG, Level Up Games, and then Star City.
Okay, so 2 locals then with Dice City and Level Up, and the rest were your standard, we're at every Star City guys, basically.
Yep, exactly. And I think the real standout was God's Arena. I thought they were a local until I was told they were from Canada. Vendor share looked pretty decent, but it's difficult because you'd have to sum up the total of all the events that were running, and I don't know how to get the numbers for the command zone. That area was in flux. There was a large CEDH event that happened. I think there was an amount of free play that could happen. The room was free to enter, remember, so people can kind of come and go as they please. From what I heard, though, overall, vendor share at Star Cities is pretty meager, but that's because of what is happening with just Magic events on the whole. You're no longer seeing like hundreds of people per vendor. You're probably somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 50 to 75 per vendor based on the given day. But the ability to kind of branch out and serve more than one audience often seems to kind of help, because it helps. Yeah. You can stand out in a number of ways now instead of just being dedicated to one thing. On that note, there was no vendor there selling just one game. Everybody had.
That was my next question. Was there a game that seemed more popular? Like, obviously, Magic was stocked by, I assume, most, if not all, of the vendors. Yep. What was like the second most stocked game? Was it Pokemon, One Piece, SWU?
I think it was Flesh and Blood overall. For me, it's a little hard to tell because I don't know Lorcana that well. And so I wasn't looking to see who had what in regards to repeat cards to kind of tell me like we're serving a format rather than a bunch of collectors.
Yeah.
But the Fab selections seem to be the largest and the most varied. I will say I think Level Up was the only booth that carried the resources for One Piece.
The Dawn?
Mana? Yeah. They had foil Dawn in the case. They were the only ones to have that, and I did make a point to converse with them about that because it seems like nobody really brings Dawn with them.
Yeah.
And not a lot of vendors had One Piece either. So I would say on the other side, One Piece was the most underserved game that wasn't Magic. I do believe everybody probably had slabs for all of the games, including Magic, so all of those markets were served as well.
And the other thing, and this is one that I guess it's kind of like a finger on the pulse of vendors in general, was there something that you noticed that was like universally hot listed among them?
Yep.
Or
Straight. There was a card that was universally missing and a card that was universally hot listed, and that's Psychic Frog. Galactus was the only people to have frogs in the case at some point on the weekend for $10. Everybody else was buying it somewhere around $8. At one point, I walked up to Star City and they had their little empty clamshell case with a photo that said if it was near mint, it would have been 10. If it was SP, it would have been 8. That was the card on everybody's list. Outside of that, dual lands were obviously very popular. I think Trop was probably the number one dual land on most people's lists. Okay. I still saw a lot of people buying Bowmasters. I saw a lot of people buying... there's another card that I'm just spacing on right now for Legacy that surprised me. It wasn't like City of Traders. Tabernacle was on a lot of lists. I think this weekend, because of the CEDH, let me check real quick. It was a 5K. I think a lot of buy lists were slanted to that because of the event. I don't know how often CEDH 5Ks happen at Star Cities, but that did kind of feel like it changed the context of what was going on in a lot of both the cases and buy lists.
That's interesting because when that was 4 or 5 episodes ago, we talked about CEDH impacting finance and like we expect it to go. So it's interesting that a 5K would have that much of an impact at an event that largely was not CEDH for the weekend.
Correct.
Okay, interesting. Also worth noting, I think the last Legacy Challenge this weekend, Psychic Frog was 28 of 32 copies represented in the top 8. So
Yes.
unsurprising there.
So my local made it to the top 8. He played against Eldrazi. He was on Scam. We were joking. One of our friends is his manager. I'm the equipment manager because he was basically renting my deck.
Yeah.
And he's the talent. He played against Eldrazi. Corey Baumeister on a very similar Scam deck also played against Eldrazi, right? So we have a mirror match right there. That's 4 out of the top 8. There was also, to the left of my friend, his challenger after winning his top 8 match, a Grixis Delverless Delver deck that played against a Dimir, like, mid-range deck. So that's a Psychic Frog mirror.
Yep.
And then the last table that was there was also Grixis Delver. It threw me. I haven't seen the list, but I saw Badlands, which tells me it's Stalactite Stalker, but I didn't see Stalkers. I saw Delvers. So that's Psychic Frog playing against like Esper mid, and I did not see Psychic Frogs, but I only watched sideboard games, but I was told that list did have Psychic Frogs. So we're also looking at a top 8 that was 3/4, 6/8 Psychic Frog. Like, wow. That card was all over. I also heard the 1K, the Dark Depths podcast did a quick breakdown. Scam was over 20% of the field, but when you start lumping in Dimir midrange and Grixis Delver, Dimir Delver into that, the Psychic Frog metagame share also starts to increase, which speaks to why this card was in no cases, but on every hot list.
That is wild. Was there something feedback-wise from vendors that they said, hey, this is the thing that, obviously we're not in a mono Magic vertical anymore. Mm-hmm. Was there something that the vendors basically gave feedback of like, hey, this is kind of the thing we want to emphasize more, or was there evidence of that in cases? Like, 95 is obviously your standard for Magic.
Yep.
They're going to have duels, power, all that stuff. But they were also one of the first people to kind of pivot into other games. So was that prevalent? Obviously everywhere, but was there something that vendors indicated in some way? This is like what we're trending towards for the future.
I think it really is actually less about trending in terms of games and trending more in terms of still finding the right events to go to. It seems like a lot of people are doing Star City because there's guaranteed turnouts, so they have to shape their cases based on the events that are there. And I know that doesn't quite answer the question, but it kind of seemed to be the way things were going. Like if there was another event series local to a lot of these vendors, 95 is in Delaware, Level Up is in Maryland, SCG is in Virginia, Galactus is from Italy, so that doesn't matter. Dice City's
Toa's Pennsylvania, Dice City's Baltimore. Yeah.
Card Monster I thought was Tennessee, and then Strike Zone, is that Florida?
That is Florida, right? Yes, so and Card is Tennessee, yeah.
Yeah, so you're looking at a lot of vendors that would have to drive into the Midwest to go to NRGs and Apex gaming events, but if those events seem to be better, they might start going there. So it seemed like there's still this kind of chase for just the correct events to go to, rather than setting up the correct cases for the events they're at. There's also a problem with not the Star City scheduling, but the announcements. So we had Baltimore, Tampa's coming up. We know what the RC is, but there's one in Ohio. They announced the event, but we don't know the formats. So if you're going to start working on building up stock, like let's say you're low on Modern, you have to start buying into Modern at some point, but you need to know what these events are. So it seemed like that was more of the trend than anything else. Other than that, it really was just kind of the monotony of we need a specialist to understand these games. We need to understand what the cards are that are collectible, that are played, and then shove them in the case. But because Fab's been around for a lot longer, it's a little more solid. That seemed to be a lot easier for people and seemed to be more engaging overall. I didn't see a lot of business happen around Pokemon or Lorcana or One Piece or SWU at the end of the day. But there's also a lot going on at every vendor. I didn't eye every buy, right? But I don't think anybody had a buy list up or a hot list that was visible that included those games. It was all Magic-based hot lists, the on-prem.
Was there? Obviously there was sealed products. Strike Zone was there. Star City was there.
Yep.
Was there non-Magic, non-Flesh and Blood sealed available?
Not that I can remember. I'm bringing up the photo that I took of Strike Zone's booth where you can see their stripe of packs, and behind that are boxes. This is kind of what we're seeing in terms of sealed. Oh, no. Oh, there was. I remember this. My LGS has a one-piece box. That's a first edition.
From the first print run pre-errata.
Yeah, it's the black box with gray text on it. Somebody definitely had one piece sealed there, but I did not take inventory of that. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I was just curious if people were bringing sealed of other games, because that will move. Because obviously Magic sealed, it'll move the weekend it comes out at a Star City. I just have never seen it move after that, so I was just curious.
Let me check my notes, because I think I noted everybody who had sealed. I'm hoping Commander. I don't think Star City had infinite supplies, but they're local, so it makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't see anything about where that was. Okay. Sorry.
Okay, that's fair.
Oh, Dice City. Dice City had a bunch of sealed. They had Commander decks and a bunch of other stuff, so it could have been Dice City that had it.
Fair. Yeah, I know for a while Star City in their contract was similar to Channel, that it was like, hey, you can only sell Magic. We don't let anything else happen, and it can't be standard sets unless it's collector boosters, like all these caveats, so I just wasn't sure.
Yep.
Was there a day that it seemed like, I mean, obviously, a lot of times Friday's usually the busy vendor day.
Yep.
And then Sunday afternoon and Saturday around 2 o'clock, once round 3 hits and round 4 hits in the main, and people start dropping. Was that the typical vendor cadence throughout the weekend, or did it seem like there were other times where things got busy?
That was basically the cadence.
Okay.
Friday, I'm sure business was done. I was there until about maybe 5 p.m. and then after that is basically the legacy event through the rest of the day. I left on a high note to go watch the Orioles game, so I don't know how the vendor room closed out on Friday. But Saturday very much had that cadence. But Star City also tried to launch as many of the large events at the same time as possible. So there wasn't this just constant buzz at the vendor booths. The entire room had this ebb and flow. And I didn't play in the main on Saturday, but I could definitely tell when all the events were winding down and when it was time to just get out of the area so everybody could just kind of pack in while they were waiting.
Fair. Was there, that's interesting to me, because was there a lot of coverage at that time, or was it just, hey, we want it to look full? Because typically my experience TOing and stuff is you don't want to fire a bunch of those at once, because it's a fucking nightmare to do it once.
Yeah, so it's not like they were firing a ton of them. So Saturday was the Modern Main. So that was basically the only large Magic event they had running throughout the entirety of the day. I don't know what was going on in the command zone. I didn't really hear a whole lot of notifications for that. They had their own set of judges in there, and I think their own event registration. So that area kind of took care of itself. I think alongside the Modern event on Saturday, let's see, the CEDH 5K was then. There was a Disney Lorcana 2K, the Star Wars Unlimited 2K, both at 9 a.m. alongside the Modern Main. So they basically ran those 3 events at the same time.
Oh, okay.
And there were a fair number of entrants in both of those events, but it didn't feel overwhelming because we're only talking about a main that had 351 entrants in it with a cap of 400. And those 3 events combined still didn't fill the room. They did a really good job estimating how much size they would need for everything, and so it was extremely manageable. The only issue I had from, let's say, a TOing perspective was I had no idea what judges were on what event based on any kind of accoutrement they had. They all had the standard Star City blue and white polo, and it looked like they all had the same name tag. So the judges that were at the Fab booth right at the entryway that were teaching people how to play the game, well, I don't know if they were actually judges just staffed by Star City to teach people. They were in the same uniform with name
the same
tags.
Name tags.
Correct. Yeah. So if somebody was calling a time where this became an issue was the feature match area that I mentioned was really far away from the main, and they didn't have a judge. And at one point in time, I was birding the end of the Modern Main because my friend was there, and I could hear the feature match area call for a judge. There were no judges in my line of sight, so I looked left. I found the bunch of judges on the Magic event, and I just pointed to the feature match area. But I was just taking a guess that they were Magic judges because I knew one of them was, but they were all hanging out in an area between the Magic events and everything else. Yeah, that
interesting.
Yeah, that was a little weird to me overall, but it also speaks of like homogeny in the event where everybody is just kind of there to do the job. It's just sometimes somebody might hand you off to somebody different because they're not the right person for that one job. That was the only little kind of rub from a TO perspective.
Other question.
Yes.
Who looked better in person, Gunnar Henderson or Adley Rushman?
It's a good question. I want to say neither Mooley, but only because we learned about a local trend. So Mooley was batting 8th, and we thought everybody was booing him. Or sorry, Cowley was his last name, Cowley. But everybody was mooing him. But they are both fantastic young men.
Yeah, okay, fair.
We got to see what's-his-face. They call him the closer from Boston that looked like a bird. He stands there with his arm at a 95. The people in Baltimore call him Crabman.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and I'll say this. I'll say this now on the podcast, and I told my friend I was there with, and I told my wife this: the hubris of a closer that does not have an ERA under 1, coming out of the bullpen to a Metallica song and a light show. The universe understands this and will ruin your day. And that man gave him a 2-run home run and lost the game. You are not Mariano Rivera. You don't get to do that.
You know what's absolutely insane about Mariano Rivera, and this is our last aside before I get back to questions. He has given up fewer runs in the postseason than there are men who have walked on the moon.
Yes.
That's insane. Okay, anyways. Was there any, obviously streaming coverage was backpacked everything. Yeah. Was there anything that you saw that made it seem like there was or would be even written coverage to be made into an article? I mean, obviously Star City's kind of gotten away from that. I was just curious if going into such a multi-game event, there may be some effort on their part to try to push some more of those on their site.
Got it. Before you got to the last part, I was going to say yes, but when you get to the end, it's a hard no. From a TO standpoint, from a business standpoint, there no indication that Star City was going to do coverage of any stretch. There were a number of individual content creators there that glommed together and formed individual groups. So Rebel has their video rundown of Baltimore already, but they were in the feature match area. I'm sure Jarvis Yu is going to have something also in the feature match area. I don't know the person's name. Somebody said it once, but Tron is bad on Twitter was also in the feature match area. So they might have something. And then there was somebody from Apex Games in the feature match area for Legacy. And somebody else from Apex Games was there outside the rail the entire weekend. So there might be something coming from Apex as well. I do not know. Then on Friday, like I said, somebody for the Star Wars event had their own backpack stream in that area, so we might see something come from there. So we might actually begin to see, technically by the numbers, more coverage come out of these events, but it's going to be from individual contributors.
Community-driven,
yeah. Exactly. Community-driven individual contributors.
Star City doesn't have to pay those people.
Misplaced Ginger won the modern event, so we're definitely going to get something from them.
I guess the next question is overall impression. Mm-hmm. Obviously not comparing it to pre-pandemic when we had a Grand Prix every weekend, which were the glory days, and I miss those. Did this feel more like... this is, I guess, probably the worst/best way to put it. Did this feel like this was an event that was worth being at? And the reason I asked that is because I remember it was Brothers War was King of Prussia, Star City. There were 500 people there, and that was it. Mm-hmm. It was not worth us being there.
Yeah.
Did this seem like something that most of the vendors were happy with being there? Did they seem like they felt like they did okay business? Did they seem busy through most of the weekend?
Oh, boy.
Or was it just like on cadence and dead besides that?
On cadence and dead besides that. I'm going to give you some numbers real quick because I took these down. The Legacy 1K had 71 people of 128. That was kind of to be expected. It's a Friday. A lot of people probably aren't getting the day off.
And Legacy sucks right now.
To be said, I thought that was going to be a mono vibes event. It was not. It was cutthroat. People came out and played real cards. The Pioneer ReCQ, also 71 of 128. So it's 140 people. The Lorcana 1K had 20 people, so it's 160. And the SWU 1K had 45. That's 200 people on Friday for the listed events that actually kind of like, I don't want to say mattered, but those were the listed events. The side events that were firing had a different amount of people. The command zone that was going all weekend long, but those were the people that basically like paid per the individual event. So you're looking at like 200 people on Friday. It was a real laissez-faire kind of day. I honestly don't know if the amount of Commander players in the room really realistically made Friday worth it, because all those events like paid out in cash, which means players are coming in and they're not looking for cards really. They're not scrambling. They have everything.
Yeah.
They might be churning. It might be a good buy day, but it's not a good sell day. Saturday felt like a real event. It felt more like an old school like PTQ.
Okay.
But with more sides. And then Sunday was interesting because it just felt like an advanced pre-release. Everything that I could hear was basically firing the next Bloombarrow event until a certain point in the day where all those players left. And then it was basically just a din of legacy players and a handful of modern side event players in the command zone. Like, that was it. But it's not like there was a run on anything at the event. It's like Sunday shopping was a realistic thing. There didn't seem to be a whole lot of vendor to vendor going on. There was a lot of backpack to vendor going on Friday. That's generally when that happened.
Yeah.
But because a lot of those players wanted to play in the legacy event on Sunday, so they just needed a day to do everything. So they were in already. They came in on Friday, so they came in on Friday. And that's kind of how that felt. I never felt like I was pressured to do the rounds and find all the cards I wanted to buy on Friday and then like sit down and do all my wheeling and dealing on Saturday before cases emptied or cards disappeared. If I wanted more Psychic Frogs, maybe Friday was the day. But
that's what I was going to ask. Did you have your Psychic Frogs already?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
They took a long time to get here, and they've been fairly successful. But I also wasn't looking to see specifically for Psychic Frog until I noticed it was on a handwritten hot list, and I was like, there's a reason for this one, because I was just taking general notes on Friday of like what was in cases, what I was seeing, etc. There's only when I started looking for holes later on that I noticed Frog was a big one. Everybody just seemed to have kind of, it was like, the reason it feels like a PTQ is because it was just like a vibes event. Like,
yeah,
you just go there to have fun. It's just a Magic event. It doesn't have the grandiose nature that GPs got to eventually, like with 1,000+ people. It just felt like a constantly moving stream. There's also something to be said of this is a pre-release weekend too, so it had its own unique feel because of that. We tried to get in. The reason we went to go see the Orioles was because we couldn't get into the 4 p.m. two-headed giant Bloombarrow event at 3:30. I had a feeling it was getting too late to reg, and the event capped out. So Saturday was also banger because of that. Vendors were able to churn through Bloombarrow stock. People like Star City had it in stock because they're a vendor. They cracked it all, or in the week it was sent with them. Other people were buying and selling Bloombarrow from the people who were just churning through the events to buy into the next one, and that happened all Saturday long. I think Friday they might have fired a handful of Bloombarrow events as well, but like I said, I was locked in on the main. I wasn't really on the Legacy main on Friday. I wasn't really paying attention, but it felt like they were just kind of churning through those events. So.
Fair. I guess do you have any other impressions before we move on to picks?
I think the Star City events are definitely going to be something I will enjoy going to as a player or somebody who's just kind of moving stock, but I don't think I would actually want to vend them unless they were some of the only options I had in region, and I didn't. Yeah.
So insight on that with some inside baseball here. There are a couple of vendors on the East Coast, which is mostly where Star City sticks, that have said basically at this point they're not doing Star Cities that are more than 3 or 4 hours away by car, which obviously is drastically different than 3 or 4 hours away by train, because 97 is fucking terrible. Or 96, sorry, the north-south on the east.
It's 95.
Yeah. Oh, 95, okay, yeah. But yeah, it's interesting to see that kind of echoed as a player as well.
Yeah.
So you're telling me you wouldn't go to the Ohio event then, probably, because that's too far out of the way.
That 100% too far out of the way.
Okay.
Mass transit on the East Coast also turns into a piece of shit. So I live outside Philadelphia now, 25 minutes outside Philadelphia. And we were talking about, we've mused on this on the show before.
Yeah.
How we just wanted to take a train like you can in Europe and just play Magic the entire time on the way to EW, but we couldn't. We would have to drive from where we are in Jersey to Philadelphia to get a Greyhound bus to go 90 minutes to get on a train. Like, that sucks.
It's so bad.
And there were no direct flights from anywhere that I could look to Pittsburgh. So wherever the SCGCon is in Ohio, it's most likely going to be either a drive or an amount of like hoping that mass transit gets there. So it's way too far. EW is in Pitt, and that's just a 5-hour drive straight west. It's not that bad. It goes by pretty quickly. Plus, you get to pass by Pepperidge, the literal Pepperidge Farms. So like, cool. So we'll be doing that. I have the opportunity to go to RCDC. Just to see what a regional's going to be like in October, and I think I'm just going to do that, but I'm not queued, so I'm just going to be big chilling and hanging out in the city. But I don't think I would vend that. 100% vend that.
Having worked a couple of RCs under the new format, RCs are actually insane to vend. Like, they feel like Grand Prix.
Yeah.
I don't know how that magic can't be captured by Star Cities. But since like 2021, when they came back, they have not felt like they did before.
Yep. But as a vendor, and I think a little bit as a player, if there's not something else to do, if there's not something enticing about the city that these events are in, I'd probably pass on them. There's one in Tampa that some of my locals are thinking about going to, and my in-laws live down there. So my wife and I were musing about it. Like, we're going to see our in-laws a month later, so we're probably not going to end up going. But like, that would be the pull. Like, I don't want to see how bad the Tropicana is in person. I don't want to like suffer that stadium. Like, but that's all that I can think of to do in Camden, or not Camden, in Tampa. I'm
a Rays fan, and I don't want to see that stadium.
So like, that is also an event that's just like, we could go there. We could enjoy Florida in the fall, which isn't too bad, but there's just not going to be a lot to do. So how am I going to enjoy myself if I get knocked out? Like, what am I going to do as a player? Like, besides go sit in the hotel room or wander around a city that really isn't just kind of like as enticing as a Baltimore or a Philly, a Pittsburgh, etc.
Yeah. Fair.
Yeah. That said, though, I was able to do a little bit of shopping. It wasn't a problem at all. There's still some great stuff on the floor. I picked up a small, you can call it a Holy Grail card from Galactus. When I was shopping on Sunday, they had foreign white border demonic tutors in the case. For the top one was Italian. I just asked the guy, "You have any German ones?" And he looked and he got me one. And I'm like, cool, I bought it. Yeah. And this is a neat little piece of Magic history with a story.
It has flavor text.
Exactly. Far and black border cards are the first printing of all those cards, and then they were able to do it in white border. That's why far and black border cost more. Alpha Beta similarly cost more. First printings of cards in English also were black border before they became white border. And there is no demonic tutor in the original art besides the foreign white border German that has flavor text. And when you look it up, it is from Faust. It's the most ridiculous thing about a poodle. Somebody on Reddit summarized it really well after they gave the text. They said, it's something about a poodle, period. It's a whole thing, period.
Yeah. It's so that was the shape of the devil all along, a dog.
Yeah.
And it's, part of the bargain. I actually, anecdotally, I collect those because I love Faust. So I got Douglas Schuler to sign and alter it. And I asked him, do you know what the flavor text says? And he says, no. I tell it to him, and I said, so could you draw a demonic dog? And he goes, well, I have a poodle, so I'll model it after that. Did not know it was a poodle.
Yeah.
But just
awesome.
drew a demonic poodle on it. It was awesome.
Yeah. So like from that perspective too, it's pretty cool. Like that was kind of the variance in the cases. I think I have a photo in here somewhere of a case that just has high-end slabs in it. That Dice City had. And you can only see the front face of this case. But on the left-hand side, there was a handful of power, and on the right-hand side, there was a graded 9 unlimited Lotus.
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of Gonzo stuff in there too, right? People showed out for this event, and I assume a lot of that showing, a lot of that preening is just to to pull eyes.
Yeah.
You pull eyes with it. But overall,
you always want the Lotus in your case because it brings people around.
Exactly. Similarly, Level Up was not the only the set of cases to have alpha or beta bolts sold by the playset. I think they were the only ones that had Rush signed bolts. So that kind of stuff is there at the Star City event. So if they're in area and you're looking to shop for some stuff, fantastic, go do it. I sold a bunch of stuff on the weekend. Great time. I did a little bit of legwork ahead of time to make sure my numbers were good. And I moved a bunch of stuff there for myself and some other people. And that was a great time. It was super easy. So from that perspective, I would recommend these events when you have the opportunity to. You don't have to go to everyone, especially if they cycle through. If you're in the Mid-Atlantic region, go to one a year. Just build up your stock and then dump, or go twice a year. You don't have to go to everyone because they're basically just going to be all the same.
Yeah. Yeah, they're pretty similar across the board, is my experience. It's, and especially with, you have your stable of Star City vendors.
Yeah.
They pretty much always bring the same thing until it sells.
Yeah. I do have one anecdotal story, though, if you're done with questions.
Yeah.
All right. So this is about the way that buys work at Star City events when you make the top 8. And how ridiculous CEDH is as a tournament format. There's a person that one of my locals knows. A couple of them actually know him by name. Vintage player. Very good. He top 8's the Legacy 1K on Friday. That means he's got to come back Saturday morning. I mentioned that the CEDH 5K was happening Saturday as well. So he gets his buys for the next event that he's going to play in. And for some reason, I think they just assume he's going into the Modern main. So he runs through the top 8, wins the Legacy 1K, sits down at his CEDH pod for the 5K. They seat him in a pod, despite the fact that he's like, I have buys from being the top 8. They're like, okay, we'll figure it out. They eventually pull him out of that pod and give him a win. So 3 people are left playing a game of CEDH. Then he wins the next pod and then triple draws into top 4 of the CED event, because that's how the point system works when you use topdeck.gg. You 2 wins, 3 draws in a row, and that's it. That's your event. Yep. You then sit around for over 3 hours because the rounds are 75 minutes or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you just basically spend more time farting around than you do actually playing Magic. I don't know how he did in the CEDH event. We lost track of him until literally the last moment of the event. But yeah, it's a fun story about how buys work at Star Cities. It's still the same as when it was a 2-day event, or 2 days per format. If you make it into the top 8, you go the next morning and you get however many buys you need exactly into that event. So if he was playing in the Modern main, he probably would have ended up with 3 buys and only have had to play 4 rounds or 5 rounds of Magic.
Yeah.
Because the top 8 for Legacy wasn't long enough, but that's how it goes.
Fair. Mine is going to be kind of weird.
Your pick?
Yes. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I'll go first because mine's pretty simple overall. So my pick for the week is Rat Colony, a card that we were both surprised was not printed anywhere since Dominaria. When I was taking my notes for this, CK was buying 100 at $1.40. And as of recording this, CK is now buying 100 at $3.25. So the numbers stayed the same, but the price went up. There were 198 listings on TCG Player with a market of $4.25. There are now 182 listings with a market of $4.43. So we're seeing positive trends in both locations. I added this card to my watch list in December of 2023. CK was buying 152 at $1.15. They had 100 for sale at $3.70, and there were 150 listings on TCG Player at a market of $4.28. So what is so interesting about this little rat, you might ask? Well, Rat Colony is a card that breaks the rules. It's a colorless and a black for a 2/1. Any deck can have any number of cards named Rat Colony, and there are a handful of cards that do this. Rat Colony just happens to be a rat. It also
Relentless Rats also does it and is a rat.
Rat Colony gets +1/+0 for each other rat you control. That is an important line of text that we will get to later. So, for commander playability, we know it breaks the rules, and Rat Colony, in and of itself, the card name is a theme, according to EDHREC. You can literally click on the theme drop-down, go to more, and then find Rat Colony. Not rats, Rat Colony. So that's it. We're just playing a lot of rats.
Yep.
Now, the majority of decks we see on Rec are playing Rat Colony because it helps you hit a critical mass of cards with the creature type rat for the Kindred strategy. There are a large number of commanders that share the creature type, so it's difficult to kind of pinpoint what the best strategy surrounding the critical mass of rats is, but it does give you a lot of options. Once we get past the Kindred strategies, though, we see some weird combo decks like Gerard Golgari Lichlord, where you just drain your opponents with some huge rats. And for those that are curious, Gerard Golgari Lichlord costs 2 and 2 black, 2 green for a 2/2. Gerard Golgari Lichlord gets +1/+1 for each creature card in your graveyard. Cool, irrelevant. Then it has an activated ability, a colorless, a black, and a green. Sacrifice another creature. Each opponent loses life equal to the sacrificed creature's power. And then it has another activated ability that is fairly irrelevant. Sacrifice a swamp and a forest. Return Gerard from your graveyard to your hand. So when you play a bunch of rat colonies, and they're all huge from other rat colonies, and then you sacrifice a rat colony, you just drain the entire table for a lot.
A lot.
Now, a lot of these commanders that are kind of in this sludge of like non-rat based decks can be found inside a lot of builds of their appropriate color, which is kind of neat. So when you look at any, Golgari based rat, like quote rat deck unquote, be it Golgari or Jund or Abzan or Sultai, you will find a lot of these extra commanders in those decks. So there's a lot of like interplay between these as well. So it just kind of adds to like the melange of what's going on with this card. People definitely are keeping like these builds kind of tight and interchangeable because of that. You can just see it right there. Then you have cards like Patriarch's Bidding, Coat of Arm Effects, and Thrumming Stone. And these are all parts of the same decks, regardless of whether or not your win con is the combat step or draining the table whenever a creature ETBs, which is another subset of commanders that exists. So, like you enjoy pointing out, these are also parallel specs that you can make with Rat Colony. And if you're going to be trading Rat Colonies, you can kind of make a little starter package out of all these cards, which is pretty neat. The varying ways to play and enjoy these decks is actually why I like the deck overall, and it's a fairly fun and interesting way to play the game that spans the casual and like quote competitive unquote commander player base, because you just play a bunch of rats and then you just kind of do something. Like you either just rat swarm or just flinging rats around. Either way, it's fairly palatable. The timeline on this is insane. When I first took my notes, I noticed that these sold about 70 copies a day, and then I remembered I was only looking at LP, and it sells almost like 100 copies a day as of recent, between LP and near mint. When I was taking my notes, there were under 1,000 copies left. By Wednesday, there were under 800 copies left. This becomes a $6 card prior to shipping in under 300 units sold. This is a $7 card just before 600 units sold, and then it's a $10 card. So the math says we'll sell through this in under a month, so if we can relist for an almost double up, we'll be able to make some profit pretty quickly. There are a few bricks that do need to be bought out during this, but they're almost like milestones and not kind of like true bricks. We're looking at people that have like 12. So 12 is your milestone marker. You buy
not a Gaming Co. situation then where you've got 250 anchor.
Correct. Exactly. It's not an anchor. It's just a little brick. You just buy your 12 at this number, and then all of a sudden, our rat's a $7 card. Vendor buy lists were lagging. I said are lagging in my notes, but I think this is kind of to be expected as their customer profile is one that wouldn't really want infinite rats. And I asked you to remind me about this before in the pre-show. I don't think that note is accurate anymore. What I think was happening is that, and the more I look back on the data that I was seeing, I think vendors paused buy lists before all the Bloomborough spoilers were finished because either they weren't sure what rats were going to be doing or that we were going to catch a reprint of this card somewhere, either in the main set or the supplementals. And if there was just a deluge of this at common in the standard set, then it just tanks the price and all that work, which is why Card King was buying this for only $1.40 this week. Or earlier this week. Now it's $3, almost $4 after the credit bump. So I think there was just a pause, hold your breath, wait and see if it's in the main set or the commander, and if it's not, just crank the spigot. And I don't think it has anything to do with customer profile anymore. That was a bad note based on the data that we were given, and thankfully, because we pushed the show off, we saw that this change. So we're able to kind of analyze it a little bit differently. Reprint equity on this is also kind of a mixed bag. There have been a number of chances for WotC to reprint Rat Colony back in a standard and have chosen not to. It's not as if it was really replaced with other cards that let you play as many copies as you want in a deck either. We haven't seen that in a minute. They just haven't really upcycled Rat Colony when presented with several sets involving rats, including Wilds of Eldraine, where we had a literal Pied Piper. So I don't think we'll ever see these kinds of cards in a commander product, so the safest bet is seeing a reprint through standard, and at this point, I don't think we're going to get it on Rat Colony. It might just be yet another rat, because as you noted, this is not the first rat to have this text.
No.
Anything on the reprint quality?
No, I was going to say that's one of the things for me, too, is they have seemingly rather iterated on the effect in some way, rather than full-on revisit it. And I think that that's kind of been the overall design philosophy of Magic lately, is reiteration rather than reprinting in many cases.
Yeah.
So.
Plague Rats was an alpha. Then we moved away from Plague Rats, and we didn't come back round until we got Pack Rat, I think. And then Pack Rat was...
Relentless was in 5th Dawn.
Oh, for some reason, I keep thinking...
Pack was RTR.
I keep thinking Relentless Rats is the discard rats.
Chittering.
Chittering, okay. That's what it is, which is also in 5D, because apparently when you just unburden your opponent who's playing Affinity, it's going to work out well for you. Seems good. Okay, so then it was from Alpha all the way up until the original Mirrodin block, then like from Mirrodin block to RTR, and then from RTR to Dominaria. That's kind of when we get these like Plague Rat style effects. And instead, like you point out, they iterate on what the rat does, which is fine. Like it's an underutilized...
there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, it's an underutilized creature type, and now that we're in Bloomborough, here we are. We just didn't get a reprint on it, which is perfectly fine. You don't need to keep pumping out. Any deck can have any number of cards named blank every year. Like,
that's
whatever.
not necessary at all.
Exactly. Like, save some space.
Yeah.
By quantity, like, if anybody has bulk from Dominaria, comb it. And that's really the only advice I have. I have a bunch of these from the bulk, so I won't be picking up anymore. And I would suggest you check bulk before buying. Honestly, I don't know how deep you should go if you're looking to move these. 20 might be the right number if you're looking to trade them, because there is a correct amount for a commander deck. I just don't know what that is.
36 if you're running Thrumming Stone mathematically guarantees you that you will get every single one out.
There you go. So 36. So 20 is way too low. You need to 1.8x that number, and you'll be fine. So mathematically, if you want to just trade somebody their commander deck, you need 36 rats, a Thrumming Stone, Coat of Arms, and Patriarch's Bidding.
Yep.
Not Kindred Discovery. There's the other Patriarch's Bidding from Call Time that has whatever the delay mechanic is, the suspend mechanic. That's another one you can throw on the starter kit, but it basically just kind of builds itself. So all in all, I think this is a card that you can just get ready to move. You can buy in and move, or you can comb your bulk and move. But this is the hotness right now.
Yeah, I don't think... I cannot recall a moment in the history of the show where we have had something with this amount of liquidity per day. 100 copies is insane. That is just like mind-boggling.
Sustained.
Yeah,
as well.
yeah, sustained. And it's not like, oh, it just got unbanned, so we're buying up all the Splinter Twins or whatever.
Yeah.
It's literally just sustained at that, which is nuts.
Yeah, and just, a little more information from the tools that we provide. TCG player sales data going back to April 21st. That's the earliest sales date we've had for LP to now. 2,772 LP copies have sold since April 21st. 2,668 near mint copies have sold since April 21st. And it just becomes paltry after that for worse conditions, down into the 50s total since April 21st. So we've sold over 5,000 copies of this card. April to May, May to June, June to July. In 3 months, we've sold over 5,000 copies of this card. It's like basic land levels.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Never doubt the rat.
Never. I have a card that, man, it's weird. Okay. I'm going to read the text first. It says, each mana-producing land is a swamp in addition to its normal type. Now, I know most of you are thinking that means it's Urborg. Why would you be picking Urborg? That's not weird. It's not, though. It's Blanket of Night, an enchantment from Visions that costs black, 1. Now, this was me slumming around, digging stuff up, whatever, and I found this. So this is an interesting one because this is not reserve list. This has never been reprinted. It was upshifted as Urborg, but that's it. This is a card that steadily rose over the last 3 years. I wish I was making that up. From 22 cents to now 50. And it is a card that, according to TCG Velocity, has literally sold between 4 and 20 copies a day for the last 3 months. Now, this is the really bizarre part of this. There's no data on EDH Rec. It's in 0% of decks, literally less than 2,000. I have seen no middle school results or pre-modern results espousing this card. This is not something that seemingly has a home anywhere. And yet, we have sales velo. Mm-hmm. We have a price increase. And we do kind of have an analog to this card. So there, to me, my thought was, oh, it's just people running poor man's Urborg. But it's in less than 2,000 decks in EDH Rec. So I don't think it's poor man's Urborg. I have no idea where the demand for this card is, which may make you wonder why I am choosing it as a pick. And that is because I miss being a penny stock slumlord of the reserve list. This is a card that you can literally park and sit on forever. But the really bizarre thing here is our number of listings. This is a card that if you had asked me in a vacuum, random uncommon from Visions, there's got to be 2,000 listings.
Yep.
217 right now. That's 22 pages. If you filter for quantity 4, and this is actually doesn't exist. Nobody has a quantity of over 4 right now. I have never seen a card like this in my life specking on bullshit. But this is something that, based on prior trends, you can probably spend $10 on, get 20 copies, throw it in a box, and double your money sometime in the next 2 to 3 years. This is not something we're getting reprinted. We've had Urborg reprinted, I think, 6 or 7 times at this point before this got reprinted. It's not plane specific, so it's got a decent reprint equity, I guess. But it's not an iconic card from a time when Magic was filled with iconic cards that demanded reprints. Yeah. I just don't see it getting reprinted. I also just, it's so bizarre to me, but I'm willing to admit there's something here I'm missing. And I don't want to miss out on it because this is, 40, 50 cents. I can afford to buy quantity here and just kind of sit on it. I'm at 15 right now. Pretty much any time I see one below 50 cents, I've been picking them up if it's more than one. Because obviously with shipping, not quite as good as you'd think. But it was just a really interesting thing to stumble across and kind of see as, oh, wait, this is insanely weird. We've got LPs approaching $1 within 3 pages. That is nuts.
Yeah.
For a card that seemingly sees no play anywhere, seemingly has no demand anywhere, but clearly people are purchasing it because TCG has the data. It is just so bizarre to me, and I wanted to at least acknowledge it as like, hey, maybe there is still a way to make money on lower end stuff there's not necessarily like reserve list blue chips, but there's something with this card that gives it liquidity, that gives it desirability. And just because you're not seeing it doesn't mean it's not there, because all of the data is telling us that it is, except EDH Rec. But yeah, it's really weird. No idea.
And 50% of the decks that contain Blanket of Night contain Urborg. 47% of the decks that contain Blanket of Night contain Cabal coffers.
Yeah. So, like, if it's going to be run next to Urborg, shouldn't it be in more decks?
Yeah. The top commanders are all just, like, random stuff with Swamp Walk or things like that. Yeah, just... I checked Scryfall. I thought maybe there's just something weird with the rulings on this, and the weirdest thing is... the lands do not get the name, quote, swamp, unquote, in addition to their current name. This is a reversal of older rulings. That's like the most unique thing about this card overall. I can't figure this out. Yeah, this is such a weird card.
Isn't it?
Never been reprinted. It's not like it deserves a reprint because we have Urborg. It's just another Urborg. This is like mind-boggling.
Yeah.
I'm going to have an aneurysm. I can feel it.
When I checked EDH Rec originally, I was like, this has got to be in like 15% of decks. To have this kind of liquidity on it, it's got to be in every Urborg deck. And I like, oh shit, no, it's in nothing.
It's in nothing, literal nothing. Yeah. For what it's worth, there are vendors who have copies over 15, but it is not a filter on TCG Player. I can confirm that you can't select it as a filter because it's just literally not a filter. But if you filter for LP or near mint, and you look at quantity 50 or more, you're going to see like a small number of vendors. So there's still not a whole lot of this card out here. 19 is the largest quantity I'm seeing at $1 each with $1.50 shipping. So yeah, if you want to rip a bunch of these, you definitely can with a reasonable shipping price.
Yeah.
And then just park it until it sells out and then relist. Why not?
Yeah. Wild.
Yeah, this becomes like a $6 card very quickly when you factor in shipping. So at some point in time, there's going to be something weird that happens to this card, which we've talked about in the last couple of weeks, where all of a sudden we're going to start selling through this card and the market is just going to rocket up because somebody will have actually listed it for the appropriate number.
Yeah.
And some amount of TCG Player math is going to go on somewhere that's going to show that that number with an appropriate amount of shipping is the cheapest. That card will be bought, that will move the market price, and then we'll start seeing an increase in sales. Until we get there, people are going to get tricked into buying copies for 72 cents with $4.39 shipping on them. And that's what's going to happen. This will remain a $1 card with $5 shipping, basically, until somebody gets, like, not even tricked, just, like, showed the appropriate price for this card, buys it, and then the market jumps. So, man. So weird. If you need an Urborg on the cheap though, or you need a bunch of them, this is the way to go. I can definitely.
It is the way to go.
That. Yeah, like for parking, like $15. Again, this is the way to. This is for sure the way to go. And then it's just a real simple resell back into the marketplace.
And the nice thing is, being Visions, there's not a glut of these sitting around.
No, you're right. And Card Kingdom has none in stock. The last time they set the price though was 59 cents.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not on their buy list either because they don't want it.
Yeah, I would assume not. Like, why would they ever do that? One moment. Let's see if I can get this. Search the sell list. Title: Blanket of Night. 15 cents. You can make a whole 15 cents. They're buying 19 copies. Bang! If you found it in your bulk, money.
Yep. Heck yeah.
Yeah, if you're just looking for a quick park, I think this is perfectly fine. Or you want a secondary Urborg or substitute Urborg for something a little bit cheaper. I think this is a good option too. It's flexible. It's an enchantment, so you can get it with Enlightened Tutor. You can get it with you can't get it with the White Wish because that doesn't. You can get the Theros Wish. Idyllic Tutor. You can get it with that. Yeah. So I don't know. This is a really interesting card. It's a very interesting piece to talk about. And so far as the spec is concerned, I like. This is definitely the kind of thing.
It's purely speculative because I have no fucking clue.
Yeah, it's a really interesting example again of just something that's happening underneath the surface that we just can't really explain because invisibles, and
exactly.
If somebody out there has seen this in a piece of content, please send it our way. I am dying to know what is pushing Blanket of Night right now.
Yeah.
But like I said, before I have this aneurysm live on the podcast, is there anything else to talk about for Baltimore?
No.
All right, so we are at MtG Cabalcast on Twitter, Facebook, Patreon, and YouTube. If you want to get in touch with us individually, you are
at Damon_Thurston.
And I'm at Halt. I'm Reptar. We'll see you next week.